Part B of the OET reading test is pretty straightforward. You read a short text and then answer a multiple choice question. But I have found that for some test takers, it can be the most challenging part of the test because it really requires you to read carefully and sometimes manage some less common vocabulary. Let's take a closer look. So before we look at a sample question, be sure to subscribe to be the first to know about brand new E2 OET videos. Okay, let's see the question. You can see the questions above and the text below. You can see in this question, it's a sentence completion task. You must choose the phrase that correctly expresses an idea from the text. Some questions will be a complete sentence in the form of a question, and then you choose a complete sentence or a phrase to answer that question. Okay, does that make sense? Let's try and answer this question. So you can see that the question comes first. The first piece of advice I'd give is to read the first part, the incomplete sentence. Do not read the rest of the options. If you're trying to read the text and remember the questions at the same time, you're not going to be fully focused on the text, which you need to be. I know a lot of students will want to read all the options first, and I've taught plenty of students who have insisted it's the right thing, but trust me and avoid this approach. So, reading the incomplete first part of the sentence. The guidelines for patient consent says practitioners should try to. Okay, so it's a positive statement. They should try to, not a negative, should not. That's something to be mindful of. Next, just read the text. Focus on the reading. Focus on understanding what the guidelines are saying. What should they do and what should they not do? You should be able to read it in 30 seconds and at the absolute most, 60 seconds. See if you can read it in 30 seconds. I'll time you. Ready? Go. Okay, how did you go? Now, before you go into the answers, here's 3 quick tips. First, you want to not only find the right answer, but also practice eliminating the wrong answer. When practicing for the test, this is a great way to make sure you can answer some of the harder Part B questions. The second tip, watch out for instances where the language in the text contradicts what the answer options are. So if the question asks if something is or can, often the text will say it isn't or can't. It's a simple positive-negative relationship between the language in the text and the question. And these types of questions show up in a lot of tests, not just OET. And my third tip, be careful with similar words in the answer option. Sometimes you'll see the same words, but it's not the right answer. Again, this is where it is wise to pay attention to positive and negative language, should or should not. So on test day, you would have to take a look at the options and pick the one that is correct or remove the ones that are wrong. Let's look at all the answer options and answer the question together. First of all, option A. Document discussions rather than obtain patient signatures. Well, if we look at the text, it says, but an informative and well-documented discussion with a patient may equally satisfy this requirement. So it contradicts the option, and so it is wrong. Now, remember, if you got this wrong, don't worry. note the word that created the problem. If it were me, I would have probably missed the word equally because I wasn't reading carefully enough. My mistake is just reminding me to read more carefully. Don't worry if you need to pause this video and reread the text. This is a normal part of preparing for the test. In fact, this is when the most learning happens. Next, option B, get the patient's consent in writing for legal reasons. Well, if we look at the text, we can clearly see the negative phrase. There is no legal requirement for consent to be written. It is merely prudent. Again, this is where paying attention to negative or positive aspects of the language can really help. Now, if the word prudent is new to you, you don't actually need it to answer the question. That said, if you're like me, when I'm preparing for a test and I come across an unfamiliar word, I usually learn it afterwards. It's not a bad idea when practicing for a language test to make notes of any new or unfamiliar words after. And if the unknown word is in the answer option or question, definitely learn it. You won't want to see that word again on test day if you haven't done so. The words in the questions usually aren't too abstract or unusual, so it's good practice to learn any new words that are in the questions. They may come up again. So finally, we know that C is obviously going to be the answer now. So let's take a closer look. We can read here, care must be taken not to overestimate the scope of that consent. It is reasonable to infer patients' consent to their health records being collected and used during repeat consultations. However, this consent would not necessarily extend to the disclosure of that information to third parties, such as including health summaries within referral letters. That middle part, it's long, but that is the key point. This would not necessarily extend to the disclosure of that information to third parties. That really has the key element. The rest of the paragraph just adds proper context. So remember, at the end of the day, this test is testing your reading ability. So the better your reading is, the easier it will be. And if you want more practice with top quality reading activities and mock tests, be sure to head over to www.e2testprep.com and sign up for free. And that's it for Reading Part B in the OET Reading Test. I'm Mark. Thanks for joining me.